Casey, we have a lot of our cohort here, so if you want to go ahead and kick off, I think we can get started. That would be great.
Sounds good. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Spring 2021 Virtual Educator Externship, hosted by ElevateEdAZ, the Center for the Future of Arizona, Arizona Business and Education Coalition, and the Pima County Superintendent's Office. As a reminder, we ask that you please keep your cameras on for the duration of the session and ensure your microphone is on mute if you are not speaking. Today's session is hosted by Robertson. Rob is currently the Director of Technology Infrastructure and Network Services for Sonora Laboratories. In this capacity, he is responsible for Sonora technology platforms, delivering all IT-based services to the organization. He brings 30 years of deep technology experience to this role, with 15 years in a leadership capacity. In the cybersecurity continuum, Rob's formal training and education includes 6 industry-related certifications, including Certified Information Systems Security Professional, an MBA with a technology concentration, and a Master's Science degree in cybersecurity operations. Prior to working for Sonora Laboratories, Rob was a consultant with the Fortune 500 firm advising Department of Defense clients on IT and cyber operations. So we're incredibly excited to have Rob join us, and we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. I appreciate the introduction on that. I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share here. And y'all will just let me know when that pops up and you're able to see that.
All right, we can see your screen, Rob.
All right. Small victories. I'll take that for a Monday afternoon. Well, awesome. Let me go ahead and jump in this, folks. My intent here really is to facilitate a little bit of a dialogue and kind of tell you a little bit about Sonora Quest, what we're about, the organization, the uniqueness of it. Let me go up a slide right there. Talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, get into some details, and again, kind of stimulate a dialogue. So maybe I'll talk a little bit here for the next 25, 30 minutes to kind of run through this, give you some context. But at any time if something comes up, you have questions, comments, concerns, please feel to interrupt me. Makes perfect sense in my brain. I may not be to articulate that very well to you in the audience. And then we'll talk more about it towards the end. And we'll spend an hour together and go from there. Okay? All right. So there we go. And I'll get that going and let me get my slides. Make sure the slides in. So there's our agenda, of course. I refer to this as a Gordian knot and Rosetta Stone. If you do antiquities and ancient Greek history, just the Gordian knot was one of these unsolvable puzzles that was so complex that no one could really get through it. There's so many interdependencies in it that no one understood how to solve the problem without really thinking outside the box and cutting that knot apart, right, from ancient Greek history and Alexander the Great. And then the Rosetta Stone was this actual piece of rock that was used to translate Egyptian hieroglyphics, which were just pictures and totally meaningless, into something more useful that you could actually go through and understand through the translations of different languages what that really meant. And so you'll find in the presentation that cybersecurity can really be a Gordian knot of lots of disciplines and techniques. And the Rosetta Stone is what we do at Sonora Laboratories to really kind of break that down, to take the abstract and bring it in real world. I'll actually share with you a document we use with our team members here. Our employees see this framework that we talk about in cybersecurity and kind of what that looks like. Okay. So Sonora Quest is who we are. There's our vision, our mission, values. I like to just bring to your attention that we are a locally focused organization, about 3,200 team members. We do 28,000 patient services across the state of Arizona in 84 different locations throughout the state. This really is who we are. What we do is we're a joint venture between Banner Health and Quest Diagnostics. We were founded in 1997. There's our test menus. You can see we basically test everything. 85 to 88% of all medical procedures begin with laboratory testing. When you see a primary care physician, they say, hey, let's go get some lab work done, and that begins it. The facility you see on the screen is our main headquarters here in Phoenix. Again, 84 locations across the state, patient service centers. You may have had the opportunity to go interact with those. We're in Safeways, strip malls, kind of all across the state of Arizona. But the bulk of the testing and all the specific testing is done right here in Phoenix at our new facility we built about a year ago. With that said, operationally, We're doing about 85 million tests a year. That's 70,000 tests a day on various disciplines from across the spectrum in the laboratory space. And that is not COVID testing. We're doing, and let me check real quick on my computer. We did 11,714 tests today for COVID-19 specifically. We're watching that every day. And I should, the operational focus that SonoraQuest Laboratory maintains. Of course, last year, there's nothing like working in a laboratory during a global pandemic. It's been some interesting times for us, and how we organize operationally and how we had to scale our services, not only to patients in the field, but also back-end machines, logistics, computers, all of that infrastructure, and how we had to scale all of that. So that's what we do. And our successes, of course, and we're proud of what we do and how we're able to deliver those patient services all the way out to the edges. Our intent is to get as close to the patient as possible. So that's why you'll see a SonoraQuest right next to a Domino's Pizza in a dry cleaners. You'll see SonoraQuest Laboratories in a Banner Health facility. You'll see a Banner Health Center location that's full of SonoraQuest employees, or you may see a single SonoraQuest employee at your primary care physician, particularly with phlebotomists, those folks who draw blood. We will put an individual person with those skill sets right there in your primary care physician location as well. So kind of everywhere. And that really kind of ties into the operational model of the business as to what we do and how we defend it. My role is to talk about technology and deliver technical services all the way out to all those different locations. And it begins with the conversation on the Gordian knot and how we use technology. At SonoraQuest Laboratory, we have a whole kind of gambit of technologies that are out there. And these are things that we use consistently to enable the business, to ensure those 24/7 operations that are sustainable. Go through some of these a little bit too and talk about the cloud. The cloud is just that. People ask me, Rob, what is the cloud? What does that mean, right? Well, the cloud really is somebody else's computer with an external connection. So in a cloud service from Microsoft or Google or AWS, Amazon Web Services, it's someone else's computer infrastructures, the servers, the storage, all the equipment is owned and operated by someone else. We just consume that service, that platform that they provide, we use it ourselves. So that's what cloud is. And there's a big transformation across the IT business in general to get away from on-premise, bent metal, server storage, computers in a big room with lots of blinky lights. 5 years ago, it was very common to run those data centers. Now it is less common. It's the expense, the operational overhead, the maintenance, the care and feeding, if you will, of those complex of that environment to make sure it's got power, water, fire suppression, all of that goes with it. It's no longer a concern. We set that aside and we focus on the actual delivery of service. And that's that other dot that you see come up, X as a service. You've heard of software as a service, and desktops as a service, well, phones as a service. Here at SonoraQuest, our CIO is really doing the digital transformation to focus on the services and much less on the back-end technology of chips and parts and components and all of those kind of infrastructure, traditional infrastructure roles. Internet of Everything is just that at SonoraQuest. Everything from temperature monitors, because the lab environment has to have very specific temperature and operating conditions. The instrumentation itself has a network connection to it, and technology is supported remotely. The computers that are used in administration, the computer used by finance, the computers used by lab technicians. When you see an in-office phlebotomist, they're in there typing your medical information. All of that's collected and delivered across the internet of everything. So it's lots of information, lots of connectivity, lots of challenges to defend that. Social media presence, automation for us is really forefront in our organization. The lab process, as you can imagine, with 70,000 specimens a day, they have to be collected, they have to be delivered. You've seen the little white Kia zipping around town that says SonoraQuest Lab on the side. That's our courier service. Well, you provide a specimen at a patient service center, it has to be physically picked up and transported to a location, generally the Phoenix picture that you saw earlier. And when we move into that space, how do you process 70,000 a day? So there's lots of activity. We try to automate that as much as possible. Our B2b connections are business-to-business connections. When those lab results are processed, Who are they delivered to? Are they delivered to you? Yes, they are. Delivered to your primary care physician? Yes, they are. How does that happen? How does that information get transported safely, securely, reliably to those different endpoints? That's something we work on every day to make sure that is efficient as possible. Working from home for us has been a new dynamic in the sense that there are still folks that have to come into the lab to do the manual processing, but administration, as far as finance, marketing, sales, HR, they've been able to work offsite and work from home. That is a new paradigm for us. How do you connect from your living room? As you sit in your office and visit the home office now, how do you securely reach back into that environment with all this information? We talk about the mobile apps, of course. You can use your cell phone now. You can use tablets. We automate our courier fleet as well. So they're actually in that little Kia running around town, getting the updates on their laptops about where their next location needs to be, that kind of information. Big data is the amalgamation of all this information. A lot of information passes through our environment. If you think about going to a patient service center, say, hi, my name's Rob. I'm here to get a blood draw. Great, thank you. Here's your insurance card. Here's your credit card if you want to pay for services. So now we've kind of got that information, transactions going, a lot of data that runs through that. So that's that entanglement of technologies that we use, we have to manage. And as you can think about all the different disciplines that kind of come around that, how do you synthesize that together and defend it against a myriad of threats, which are the red dots that we'll populate with. And some of the challenges that we have at Sonora Laboratories around cybersecurity and technology in general. It begins with antiquated technology. And interesting in IT, antiquated, in finger quotes here, could be something that's as young as 2 or 3 years old. The rapid pace and change of technology means that things and infrastructure you may have invested in as an organization 3 years ago have now been usurped by the next generation. So we'll have equipment on site that may be 7, 8, 9 years old. How do you deal with that equipment? How do you maintain it? What is the technologies that are kind of wrapped around that? So we have different operating systems. We have different variations of technology, kind of different levels that we have to recognize and account for that could be a threat. You've heard on the news, when you have the president's press secretary say, patch your Exchange server, or you've heard about on the news SolarWinds attacks and Microsoft. All of those things apply to our environment, and that talks about antiquated technology and how we have to defend that from those threats. And interesting though, beyond the technology is, as we get into a little bit, is process failures, and we get into configurations and regulatory compliance. There are other soft skills, if you will, that are based on research and reading comprehension and pulling these concepts together beyond just the technology itself. There's equally as valuable and can be as equally challenging. Rob just didn't follow the process. He knew what he had to do. The technology was in place, but Rob's clicking the wrong buttons and he got himself in trouble. Process failures. I thought I did the right thing. I thought I configured a piece of technology properly, but I didn't. The light turned green. Everybody did their business, to include the hackers, because I misconfigured it. So there's opportunities there to kind of understand regulatory compliance, how technology is used, how process flows. Those are challenges, threats to us, if you will, when those are not followed. Of course, the other spattering of nation state actors, hacktivists, cyber criminals, the typical things you hear about are things that we're very attuned to, but also note we call out return on investment and insiders. Return on investment is just that, is a financial business component. The new technologies that are deployed, the spend around that, as you can appreciate in the education environment, it's competing demands for limited resources. There's lots of things you would like to do, but budgetary constraints just don't enable that. We experience the exact same thing in corporate America, and particularly at Sonora Quest, those competing demands. So then you have to have a risk conversation. If we elect to spend our money elsewhere, what does that do from us from a risk perspective? Does it increase our risk? Does it decrease our risk? Those returns on investment are equally as important when you're making these 7-figure decisions on where you want to spend your money. If the company spends their money on Rob's firewalls, for example, they're not giving pay raises. They're not buying lab instrumentation. They're not doing all these other things. And so you have to be attuned to that in cybersecurity and in IT in general to understand what the value is to the business, both as an operation and as a financial construct. What does that really mean? So we spend a lot of time looking at it, and I never get enough money, so I always think it's a threat. You always want that budget and you have to figure out what that looks like. Insider threat's an interesting one as well. This goes to the end user, the lab technician, the person working in marketing, the person who's in the corporate environment doing their day job as a corporate employee. But they may not be aware of what they've been exposed to, the information that they're receiving. You've heard about email phishing. You've heard about all these other techniques from social engineering. All of these kind of social psychological constructs come into play. Well, somebody called me and said, hey, can you give me information about the following account? That is a form of cybersecurity. That is a form of social engineering where your information was just compromised. So there's an interesting kind of human dynamic that really is based on the person that's in cyber threats. Let me pause there just briefly for questions, comments so far. Okay. Well, what does it look like at Sonora Quest? What happens in our cybersecurity orbit? Here's what we're faced with this Gordy knot. 24/7, 365, we are continuing operating. We're highly regulated. HIPAA for your healthcare information, PCI for your credit card information I talked about earlier. CAP and CLIA are actually healthcare-based operational licensures that we have to do. Any hospital that you're in has to have a functioning laboratory to be accredited and actually run. So if you go to Dignity Health or Honor Health or Banner Health, there's a lab component to that. And if it's not functional, then they're no longer licensed to do that. That functionality can be dependent upon technology as well. We're a robust social media, so we're kind of everywhere in the social media presence. And we were mindful of what that means and what kind of information we put out. The hybrid digital ecosystem is just that. We have some servers and storage and equipment that's on site, that's in the lab. We're also in Microsoft Azure, we're in the cloud. So there's that interplay of cloud and X as a service and what that looks like spread all across the state. Well, Rob, how do you get all this information from your locations to Lake Havasu, Tuba City, Yuma, Prescott, 5 locations across the Tucson area, 30 locations across the Phoenix metro area? Think about all those little unique places I've got to push the technology out to, so that comes into play. I said 84 earlier because we just added 2 today. 139 specific applications. Because we're in the laboratory space, we have lots of unique applications, what I like to call microservices: histology, cytology, flow cytometry, genetics, genomics, hematology, general lab, anatomical pathology. There's a list of these different, very specific things that our laboratory tests and provides services for. And so there's an application to run them that are also very unique. So we have this large portfolio of disparate applications that we have to integrate together. 42 different niche vendors, means they're very specific vendors in the space. One company only provides you anatomical pathology instrumentation and network connectivity, and they want to support it, and they might be in Israel, or they might be in Germany, or Switzerland. So as we buy this specific laboratory instrumentation from a particular vendor, they're very unique in that space, which is great, but I have to be mindful now of the kind of the geography in which we spread our services out so those teams can support it. And we're about 75% virtualized. Virtualization is just another technique, another attack surface, if you will, of machines on top of machines, and kind of what that looks like in the software space. And then finally, daily, we get about 300 cyber door knocks. That's about 1 instance every 5 minutes. What is a door knock? Someone on the internet, someone in that network connection is coming up and saying, hello, can I get in? Hello? Hey, I have credentials. Can I use these credentials to access your network? No, but we see that in cybersecurity. We recognize someone knocking at the door. Think about if you have a ring system at home, you see who's approaching, you see what they do, you record that conversation, you let the pizza guy in or not, or you ignore the salesperson, that kind of a thing. We do that in the cyberspace every day. So it comes down about every 5 minutes, someone is trying to access our systems that aren't Sonora Quest employees or business partners. So being mindful of that and being aware of it goes back to the ROI conversation. I can go to the boss and say, hey, look, we're getting a lot of interest from locations, pick a place. and what that means and what are they trying to get into, and we can adjust and tailor kind of our entire cybersecurity continuum. That's us. That's the Gordian knot. Questions, comments on that one? Okay. So what do we do about all this stuff, Rob? It's a big mess. You talked a lot about all kinds of things. How does Sonora Quest approach it? Well, we approach it with two departments. This is a business model now, and we have IT, information technology and services, that's me, but I have a partner in information security. So in your Venn diagram, if you think about kind of two concentric circles, IT services, cybersecurity is the technical part, and information security is the administration, the governance, and the oversight, and the policy and procedure part. And we meet in the middle with some daily operations. We're deliberately designed that way on the principle of separation of duties. We don't grade our own homework in IT services. We ask for someone else to validate it. Rob says the firewalls work. Rob says that people can or cannot get in and have appropriate permissions. Don't take my word for it. Go to a completely separate department to get that same sort of information. So we're set up like that. Cybersecurity is an IT function, very technical, very hands-on. Think about that as someone who's taking a class in networks, network security, file servers, storage, coding, software engineering. That kind of degree plan, those kinds of classes, that kind of instruction falls into cybersecurity. Information assurance, information security is more about policies and procedures. Being able to research online, go to disparate organizations and gather, synthesize all kinds of policies and procedures, create your own, analyze your own, kind of come up with that. That's why we're separated. That function, as you see, reports to the CIO, and then our chief risk officer is the one who's in charge of information security, policy, procedure, compliance. Some more examples. That's the technology, that's risk management. We manage the technical piece, and our partners, information security, they manage and create the policies which we align to. We are the authority in cybersecurity around technology and specifics, and our friends in information security, they are the authority around compliance and regulation. Again, the principle of separation of duties and not grading your own homework. We configure it, we operate it, we maintain it, we do all the cyber stuff, if you will, hands-on, and the information security team will come in and understand what we're doing and that aligns with proper policies, procedures, and that information, how that information is protected with policy and our compliance and technical integration of that. Now, we advise project management, which is kind of interesting. It's the project management office at Sonora Quest has IT components to it. We buy a new lab instrument. We buy it from a company in Germany, and they test COVID-19. True story here. How does that supported, across the sea? How is it supported to do COVID-19 testing from a company that is headquartered and supported out of Germany? What do they do about it? How do we assign that? We work with project management to answer those technical questions, whereas the InfoSec team does the education and understand what the business components of those are. So we kind of play off on that. We come to a happy medium of, yes, we understand what you need to be able to do, and they understand what we need to be able to protect, and we come together in that area. First responders to cyber incidents, if we see those cyber door knocks and somebody actually opens the door, my group in IT&S is responsible to respond to that. The information security team actually is doing the monitoring. They want to see what's going on as well. They want to see what kinds of email is leaving the organization. Did Rob attach a spreadsheet, however well intended, with a bunch of medical information to send it off to a doctor's office? Or you've now leaked information out that has personally identifiable information, healthcare information in it, and that's a violation of policy. The fact that the email went is a technical solution. The fact that it had the wrong attachment in there is an InfoSec solution. And we do the threat analysis. We are constantly looking at those cyber door knocks. We constantly look at the point of origination, what they're trying to get into, who they are, and what they're up to. But we also recognize that information security says, Rob, is it properly configured? Are you doing what you said you would do? They test with external pen testers to validate that configuration. And finally, some certifications in that space. again, aligns to the separation of duties. Network security, Security Plus. These are tests that are offered by Comptia, if you're familiar with that organization. It's a third-party, non-vendor specific that I really like. That certification is not based on a particular view of the world from Cisco or Microsoft or any of the other players. It's really about the concepts and fundamentals. And I think that in a curriculum environment, the opportunity to use Comptia-based information is really valuable. The knowledge and skills, abilities are gained with these certifications, kind of that background information is a good place to go in and align your classroom techniques to that and introduce this concept of digital fluency. Whether you're teaching 8th grade or you're teaching high school seniors, somewhere in that continuum, based on your classroom and where your students are at, there's always that opportunity to understand what the technology is and how it plays together, and just kind of develop that digital fluency to understand, oh, I get it. I think in this generation of folks that you see every day in your classroom, that we see in our younger employees in particular come in, they're very screen focused. I'm on my screen all the time. But then in this role, do they understand where that information comes from? So the genesis of that, how it connects, where does that information flow? I think there's opportunities to appreciate that and begin that digital fluency at a very early age, and not just say, hey mom, let me configure your iPad, but actually get into the environment and understand kind of how that works and where does the information come from, right? I think some of that Comptia curriculum is very helpful in doing that. I think another component of this in this space also is systems thinking and being able to think holistically, be able to connect dots. I refer to what we run here at Sonora Quest as a digital ecosystem. One of my responsibilities beyond cybersecurity is integrating that digital ecosystem, taking all of this information, the platforms that run it, and understand systemically how these things connect together, the dependency. If I push the first domino, which domino is going to fall, how those all connect together. So that systems thinking, to be able to kind of look at that and think logically through a process flow, I think is invaluable. And that can take different forms, of course, but it's the idea that you're able to take an abstraction of technology and be able to convey that. Another note, this may be useful in your curriculum as you work with your students, is to consider how they demonstrate those skills. How are they communicating? And reliance on soft skills. For example, PowerPoint, Microsoft Visio are tools to create what I affectionately call cartoons. What they're doing is they're conceptualizing these ideas, and they're demonstrating them in a form of nonverbal communication. It's a PowerPoint presentation. It's a diagram. It's connecting the dots that has some sort of flow and logic to it. The picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, can they create that? And can they take this abstraction and put it on paper, if you will, and create pictures like that are meaningful and be able to talk to them and be able to explain the nuances and subtleties and the rationale, and kind of to show your work piece of it as well and work through that. So again, that's digital fluency, but also that systems holistic thinking. And let's see, the other piece of this I was just going to show you. Internally, we're connected by standard operating procedures. That's our linkage between the two verticals there. How we talk to each other internally, how we liaison with one another and go back and forth. Questions or comments there, folks? Anna, did you have something? On mute.
We see you talking, we just can't hear you.
Are you still with me?
Do you want to maybe type your question in the chat if you can? Okay, or maybe try unmuting yourself and see if that helps. Okay. If you do want to type your question in the chat, please feel free. Otherwise, we can try again in a couple minutes.
All right. The next thing I'm going to share with you folks is a real world document. And the next slide is it's a framework. It's an IT career tracker that I use with my team members. How I lead leaders, how I work with my managers, and how they lead their individual contributors. This career tracker in IT is not prescriptive. It's to stimulate conversation. As you progress through your career in cybersecurity, specifically as a cybersecurity engineer, this is to coach, teach, and mentor the individual contributor, that team member, for their career. Now that could be at Sonora Quest, and we hope they stay forever, or that could be another organization, and that's fine. It's what resonates with that individual that aligns and speaks to them, and they bring that passion, but also in the confines of some guardrails of this is what the business needs as well, and this is how you can progress through these steps. So if someone begins a career in cybersecurity, this is a technique. This is just one I prefer to give to my team members, so we have the conversation, again, to stimulate the conversation. So it is a real world document that we talk about. So there it is. Now you'll see it is a consistent framework. It happens to talk about cybersecurity for this particular forum. I use it for systems engineers, software engineers, database administrators, the same concepts. The left-hand side is guiding principles, roles, and IBT we'll talk about. And then, of course, the swim lanes and go across and what specifics are. Your foundational, your advanced, your mastery, your cybersecurity engineer 1, 2, or 3. There's compensation, obviously, that goes with that, and with the compensation packages as you progress through the organization. But specifically, I just want to call it a few of the differentiators. Overall, foundational, it's very tactical, hands-on, on the keyboard, heads down, doing what that job needs to be doing. Then you move into advanced, it's more operational. It's the process, that end-to-end, that systems thinking I was telling you about. You've built some digital fluency. You're now talking about the process and what it looks like. And then as the systems or cybersecurity engineer 3, the mastery level is very strategic. You're looking at the entire organization. You're looking at how I can position Sonora Quest in the best cybersecurity form as possible, and how to take all the stuff that Rob talks about in that Gordian knot and how to break it down and translate it. And this is your Rosetta Stone. This is where you take those abstractions and go, okay, I know exactly what I need to do. So for example, in the left-hand column there, foundational skills. You look towards the bottom, it says, you refer to and apply appropriate knowledge and documentation. But then you move up a level, you create that documentation. So that implies some understanding of the technologies, the ability to write and to clearly articulate some of that. Then notice on the third side, the mastery, is you critically review that documentation. So there's how you build on those skills. Yes, I can follow the instructions. No, I've created the instructions. And then there's your editor, because now you've built on all of that experience and what that looks like. Time in the role is generally, what we'd like to see. A couple, 2, 3 years in that space. And 3 to 5, 5 to 6, and 6+ as you move through it. That's time at Sonora Quest to understand the business, what your emphasis is on, day to day, day in and day out. Notice there's some on-call rotations, working with service desk, but then as you move at the mastery level, you're no longer on call, right? Rank has this privilege a little bit. You have to have some sort of incentive to not get the 2 a.m. phone call. Let me spend a little bit of time here, folks, then on the IBT indicator. We get a lot of dialogue and conversation with our team members around this particular space. This is the whole person, 360 degrees. This is you. You have interpersonal skills, you have business knowledge, you have technical skills. And look at the first level, the emphasis on technology. You've got to have digital fluency. You've got to understand with those certifications and education, you've got to be able to apply those and really do the technology. You have to understand a little bit about the business, about the different disciplines at Sonora Quest, or any business for that matter, and understand how the business runs, what the use case would be for the end user, and then be able to articulate that and interact with others, again, that soft skill, being an effective team member. And then as you move over a level, you are heads down technical. You really become, very critical in the operations of the business. Less about what the business does. You kind of get it now, but now you're really applying it operationally. You're creating policy. You're answering questions. You're advising the business on what you need to do for cybersecurity, and you're really spending a lot of time on technology. But then as you advance even further to get that mastery level, look how that balances out. Interpersonal skills become very critical. If you can't talk to senior leaders, if you can't talk to peers, if you can't talk to others and interact with them and exchange complex ideas with technical and non-technical audiences, that's going to be a problem, but that needs to be your emphasis. You're not going to get away from the technology, but we're really going to push on that. So let me drop down a level, and if you think over here on the strategic side, mastery skills as well, notice that we have a Sonora Quest leadership journey and Crucial Conversations. Crucial Conversations is a third-party training program, 40-hour instruction on how to engage with people on soft skills. Patrick Lencioni, 5 functions of a team, dysfunctions of a team, business intercommunication skills. We give a Myers-Briggs inventory at that level as well as part of the journey, the leadership journeys. That is a 50-hour block of instruction from Sonora Quest to understand who you are as a person, and who others are, and how you have to modify your communications to do that. Because you can be the greatest, have the greatest technical skills in the world, but if you can't translate that to others on your team, if you can't translate to others in your department or others in the business, then there's going to be a challenge, and that's why we really emphasize that in the IBT indicator. Certifications again, I'll take you back over to the left-hand side a little bit. I like the Comptia because it's vendor agnostic, but you notice as you move into it, there's more vendor specific. You'll find that in different companies. Is what I call Coke, Pepsi, Ford, Chevy. They're really not that different, but people have a strong emotional attachment to one or the other, and that's okay. You'll find that is based on what a particular business model is, and so you'll get into specific vendor certifications. You just happen to see what we use here with Cisco and Palo Alto, and getting the technical certifications in that regard. Also want to call it education. Note here, folks, we talk about an associate's degree. Not hard requirements, but this makes you more competitive than your peers in that space. I would submit to you that getting into cybersecurity, the most difficult, challenging part really is on a case-by-case basis, the maturity of the applicant, the maturity of the candidate, the maturity of the individual. If it's your first job out of high school and you haven't worked in a corporate environment, it's going to be a challenge to come in a highly technical space that touches an entire business from end to end. And if you're not getting it right, the business can go under. And it's not to be dramatic, but it has those ramifications, right? So you think about the Gordian knot. If you don't have the maturity to deal with that kind of complexity, it makes a difference. It makes a difference in your experience. It makes a difference in your personal experience, and it makes a difference in how you interact with folks. It can make the job harder if you haven't, frankly, had the opportunity to grow up a little bit, right? You know, and what do you want to be? How do you want to experience that? So the right out of high school applicant, depending upon maturity, may or may not be successful. But what we have found is that going to college and beginning that process is meaningful. Let me give you a personal story for me in my role here, and I've hired lots of folks in different capacities through my career. Education is important to me. I believe in it. I believe in the certification. I believe in being a lifelong learner. That's how you sustain that digital fluency. I myself will take certification courses. I will go to vendor-sponsored instructional design. Some of it's, salesy, of course, but it's maintaining your finger on the pulse. I think to emphasize that is really important. Another piece for me is that the resume gets you the interview. The interview gets you the job. Okay, so what do you put on your resume if you don't have experience? Certifications or a degree. I look for a degree when I look at a resume, not that they have a degree in computer science, not that they have a degree in cybersecurity. Do they have a degree? Because I believe to commit to something for 4 years or 5 or whatever your personal circumstance is, and to complete that shows the resilience, the commitment, and dedication that you want in a team member. They can get it done. I actually have someone on my team that has a bachelor's of fine arts degree. Okay, and they made some life changes and they got back into cyber and got interested in it, and they're actually working in systems engineering, but they liked computers, and so they pivoted somewhere mid-career, or probably realized that mixed media clay art makes it hard to pay the mortgage a little bit, right? Kind of a thing. But I don't want to make light of their commitment. They went to a university, they took courses, they completed a degree, and they put that on their resume. And to me, that's a telltale sign of like, yep, you can do the hard work. Now, is it nice to have that alignment with a major and a concentration? Of course, but I don't use it as a disqualifier either. I use that as an indicator of someone's commitment and their ability to follow through on those things. Certifications in particular, that means to me that you can absorb technical material and you can regurgitate it sufficiently enough to pass the exam. Okay, that in and of itself is a skill, not only a test-taking skill, but the ability to absorb technical information, understand the relevance and context, and then be able to present it back to the test provider in a particular format. Cool. That to me are those indicators that the person has that potential, that gets them the interview. Then we have a dialogue of what their passion is, what they're excited about, what they want to do, why they want to come to Sonora Quest, why they want to be in cybersecurity. All right, lots of stuff I've been throwing at you. I feel like I'm preaching again. Questions, comments, concerns on that, folks?
Rob, we have a question in the chat, and someone alluding to what you were talking about with maturity of candidates asked, how do you gauge maturity in an applicant?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So it will start with, unfortunately, it starts with the resume. I can kind of ascertain based on what their experience is, frankly, the resume formatting, if you will, what that looks like, how they present themselves. A resume writing is a skill, obviously. I gauge that maturity based on, well, okay, if they graduated high school like me back in the 80s, what have they done since then, right? And what does that look like? So that implies a maturity. But if they say, hey, I graduated in 2010, I've worked at Geek Squad for Best Buy, they're applying for a role like a cybersecurity engineer, I'll probably pass. And I think that's the hard part of it. I gauge the maturity better if I can get them through that resume scrub and that resume screen to an in-person interview. And then it's a conversation, it's a dialogue. I ask them about how they deal with challenges, how they deal with adversity. Give me a business solution where you had to work through an answer. How do you deal with competing demands? How do you deal with dwindling resources? For me, the interview process should be a dialogue. They interview the company as much as the company interviews them to make sure the match aligns. And so I think in that process, and to me, that's why I believe in the in-person interview when we get to that point. Kind of a long answer to a short question, but I think it's an important an important construct there to get engage the success of a potential applicant.
So I love that you said that the dialogue is them interviewing you as much as you interviewing them. And I may have missed it, but when you mentioned that you do look for a degree, is that a degree at any level?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And so a degree at any level, again, is kind of the commitment. Associate's degree, all right, done my 60 hours, I might have went to Maricopa Community, perfect, but you did it. It took you 2 years to get there. Or maybe on a case-by-case basis, you took a bunch of AP classes as a high school senior and got college credit. That to me is interesting too, because I'm looking for the ability to be resilient. When you're giving something that takes a long time and there's not that immediate gratification, can you commit to that? Can you follow through with it? And can you finish it? So yeah, associate's degree, great. Bachelor's degree should be on point. And notice on our career tracker that technical degree or business related, there might be that pivot point. We say, you know what, I want to move into a leadership role, Rob. I would like to do what you do as a director or a CIO. What does that mean? Or I'm happy being an individual contributor in a very technical space. I think the type of degree kind of varies with the position someone's applying for too. Good questions. What else, folks?
Is it, I have another question. My apologies if I cut somebody off. Is it, so you had mentioned that you're looking for maturity and maybe you do have the young person who has the Geek Squad, they have this or that. Is it unheard of, or do you encourage applicants to reapply if they didn't get through the interview process? Or is there like a kind of like a hard no until you've reached this certain standpoint, I guess?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really difficult question because it comes back to why the hard no. So I've worked in a couple different organizations, and I have found this when I work with my partners in human resources, is that someone applies, and now it's on the interwebs, right? You go to Indeed.com and LinkedIn or whatever, you find a position, you apply for it. You send your resume into this black hole of HR, and you hope that you get a response. The reality may be that on the HR side, they got 450 applications or 45 or whatever the number is, and they don't have the luxury to give a tailored response. Hey, I'm sorry, Rob, you're not the strongest applicant for this particular position. Why is never in there. There's some legal nuances to that as well that some organizations will not get into, but I think the absence of that feedback makes it much, much harder. So I say, yes, reapply. If you still see the same job out there, throw it out there. But if you've got the rejection letter, don't take the first no, but maybe take the second. Maybe ask someone else that you find in a mentor role to review the resume, from everything as esoteric as spell checking and grammar and presentation of the information to are you on point. There are actually websites that are out there that are available where you can upload a job description and scrub it against keyword searches from your resume, and they'll give you a percentage of the words that the company used in the job description appeared 78% of the time in your resume. So there's some opportunity there to kind of get in alignment, because unfortunately you're just not going to get the feedback to say, man, I wish your resume would have said this, kind of a thing. You get the interview, you might have more opportunity in the interview, particularly depending upon the level. You'll get a little more feedback as to why I've made a separate decision, why we went with a different applicant. I wouldn't hang your head on that either. It's the time and liability a little bit that you don't get that valuable feedback. So don't know if I answered your question, but that's been my experience on how applicants probably should try a couple times, but don't take it personal that they're not getting, that they're probably just getting the rejection email, and it's the email of banality kind of a thing, and that's what they get.
Rob, this is Kathleen. I have a question for you. I'm wondering if there are other areas in Sonora Quest for individuals who, for whatever the reason, need to work out of high school, coming out of high school, and are planning on going to school part-time or full-time. And maybe some have even taken a course in high school that, maybe they even have their Network Plus certification. But are there entry-level jobs out of high school that Sonora Quest hires for, that someone then could do a really good job, learn about the company, take advantage of tuition assistance, and move into a more technical role? Could you share something about that, if there are opportunities like that?
Yeah, super. So there are not, is the short answer, and specifically in the IT space. That is a gap that actually the CIO, Sunny Vardan, our CIO, is looking into specifically, and that is an absence of an internship program. While we believe in upskilling our internal employees and we invest our internal employees to move them along those paths, the absence of bringing someone down to high school, I think, Kathleen, to your point about this, a high performer, maturity level, can you give them those opportunities? Hey, all I want to do is show you what I got. Give me the chance, right? And we don't do a good job of that, frankly.
How about outside of IT, customer service, other areas in the company? 3,200 is a pretty good sized company. Are there, in the corporate office, are there some customer service kinds of positions even that are not in IT?
There are, and I would refer you back to sonoraquest.com for the jobs availability. But in our call center that we do, absolutely. There are lab technicians jobs that are temporary positions currently, and actually staff our COVID-19 response teams, because we've got to get that 24/7 coverage as well. So in the lab tech space, I think there's some opportunity there also. I would check the website, frankly, to see what the job postings are, and to look at that and apply for them, absolutely. But let me just finish by saying that in the IT space, we absolutely know we've got a gap there, and we definitely want to get a mentoring kind of externship, internship of what you want that looks like. Last year was a wash just because of COVID-19 and all that met, right? We've integrated that now, and the boss wants me and his direct reports to think about how do we do something more robust and give those internship opportunities. And so we're going to try to develop that this year. I think that's on my performance review this year, as a matter of fact.
Great, thank you.
Rob? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, hi. I teach principles of engineering in the high school, and I can see the certifications. Can you recommend, the basic ones to teach my students in order to have a basic certification for cybersecurity?
Yeah, good question. I would recommend going with Comptia, again, because it's vendor neutral. And let me be specific there too. When you take a Cisco exam, it's Cisco's view of the world. It's how they deploy their technology, it's how they sell you their technology. That is the Coke, Pepsi, Ford, Chevy argument again. So it becomes, you have to drink the Kool-Aid is what I tell my team. Understand that that's the Microsoft answer. Understand that's the Palo Alto answer. You don't get that with Comptia. I would recommend Comptia Network Plus specifically. Network Plus talks about the concepts and how those concepts play together. It gets very specific in some of the technologies that you commonly see. Comptia offers an A+ certification. That's more on the PC side. I would not recommend that. Just personal bias here. I don't think is relevant. Yes, there's some soft skill testing that goes on, but I think the Network Plus is a great one. IT fundamentals is something to consider also, depending upon your on your students in your classroom. IT fundamentals is very broad, very generic. You'll get a question about Apple iOS, and you might get a question about a specific wireless firewall. It's very general at kind of a high level, building that digital fluency. Start with your Comptia curriculum and Network Plus and IT fundamentals, and build from there. I think you'll find that digital fluency will be a great start that they can kind of capitalize on.
Great, thank you.
Well, there's what we've talked about, folks. So we're getting close to the top of the hour. And of course, always, questions are welcome. And what we talked about, it's a complex digital ecosystem. Lots of domains, lots of interdependencies. Understand that Gordian knot. Found the systems thinking, digital fluency, I think, are key in that space. Interesting about cybersecurity as well as a discipline, something I didn't touch on a lot, but I want to just reflect back on and think about your own experience in the education space. You as educators have a lot of commonality in the sense of the way you do classroom management, the way you build curriculum. You've got to publish a syllabus. You kind of work with your administration to kind of go through that. Cybersecurity is very much like that. There's a lot of different topics in it, but there's a lot of commonality as well. But just like you experience, there's a mathematics teacher, there's an English teacher, there's a physical education instructor. You get down into some specifics, and there's a little bit of differentiation there in the disciplines. While you may have common goals as educators and that you go through, when you get into your particular discipline, it is unique. Cybersecurity is very much like that. From forensics, from open source intelligence, to offensive cybersecurity, defensive cybersecurity, day-to-day business operations, all of these different concepts come out of that cybersecurity universe. So once you get exposed to that and kind of untie the knot, if you will, and be able to focus in on it, you'll find quite a bit of success and a lot of career opportunity in those particular disciplines. Start off as a generalist, build that digital fluency, and then drill down into something that you find that you're passionate about, frankly, which really interests you. Getting that job experience, for me, the scar tissue, yeah, I did this and that broke, or I did that and that broke. Yeah, that's invaluable. Also recognize, folks, that cybersecurity in general is industry agnostic, that you may be new to a business, but you're not new to cyber. The terms, the concepts, the discipline around that, go back to that IBT indicator. Yeah, you got to learn the business, but boy, you bring the technical skills and you can come up to speed quickly on the different use cases that you may expose. And be a lifelong learner. Leverage that Rosetta Stone, go back to school, go to seminars, keep your certifications up. You'll be really successful in the space and can have I think, a very enjoyable and meaningful career in cybersecurity. That's what I've got. Here endeth the sermon, I believe is what we say.
Awesome, Rob. Thank you so much. It looks like we have one other question in the chat that I wanted to make sure we highlight before we adjourn today. And it's in reference to the career tracker you just showed, which is a phenomenal tool. I think very clearly showcases that pathway for individuals that are within that space. Is that kind of template only used within the IT department, or is that seen across other departments at Sonora Quest?
It is, okay, so it was me. When I came to Sonora Quest, I brought that with me based on my previous experience. It's only found in the IT group, very specific to that. I've shared it with my peers. I couldn't speak to the level of adoption in other departments, but I know that I've had quite a bit of success using that career tracker in IT. And I think if you look at it also, that the framework, I think, holds up across disciplines. That the same concepts of interpersonal skills and business and technical skills in finance and lab operations, the education, I think the framework survives kind of cross-departmental pollination. But for me, it's something that when I got to Sonora Quest, I felt that as I changed kind of the direction of the organization group a little bit, I wanted to focus in and really empower our employees to be successful, embrace the diversity that they bring, make them feel engaged in ownership of their own career, and just structure the conversation, not be prescriptive about it either.
Rob, I hope I'm not interrupting anybody else, but I'm just going to barge right in. I looked at that as what we use in education, like in, for example, English or another subject, we use rubrics that show what you need to do to progress to the highest level, what is expected, etc. So I was I liked that because it was familiar, and I can see adapting it then to other areas of like, okay, so I'm counseling you in an entry-level position. Here's what you do. Here's how you're going to move, etc. I like that. That was very, very good for me.
Super. Thank you. I'm glad it was helpful.
Any other questions or comments for Rob? And Rob, if it's okay, we are recording this, but would love to share just this information in this presentation. And folks, I'm sure, can go to the Sonora Quest website for more information on some of those entry-level positions or any other opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And Casey, I think I did send the presentation over to Paul. If there's a Dropbox for cohorts, this slide presentation should be in the Dropbox.
Excellent. That's perfect. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much, Rob, for your time and the wealth of knowledge that you shared with us today. We really do appreciate it. And hopefully everybody had the opportunity to take something away and learn something new. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn for the evening. Have a great one, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, everyone.